Thanks for joining us tonight. So this topic is one that I feel is really so central and so essential to a life of tea, and also to a life well lived, to a life of cultivation. And I would say it's the beginning and the first point in kind of the art of life, in terms of being able to manage one's mind, emotions, body, passions, proclivities, affinities, and being in touch with our sense of purpose and connection in life. For me, meditation is something I look forward to every morning and evening, and that I attribute a lot of my ability to work through my own problems and to develop greater harmony and connection and clarity in my life. So we usually do, I want to start the class with a cup of tea in silence. Our classes, I'm just going to do 1 cup because I tend to talk through a number of things. Whereas in our morning meditations, we usually sit for 3 cups. So we're going to do 1 cup together in silence, and then I'll jump into this all-important topic, which, again, I think is just such an important aspect of life, and something that I attribute so much of my health and happiness and well-being to. So I hope that some of my sharing and some of my reflections on my life in terms of many years of meditation might be of benefit to you in your own either beginning and development of a meditation practice, or if you already have a meditation practice, maybe you'll have some insights or some ideas that you can incorporate from this talk. So thank you again, everybody, for being here on a Friday night. Even though we're not in person, it's a nice way to spend some time together and share space. So I'm also going to attempt to talk a little bit less this evening and open it up for questions, because a lot of what's central to meditation is, of course, experience. Experience is at the essence, at the center of meditation. And so I want to open it up and give an opportunity to talk a little bit with everyone and explore this topic for you, whether or not you're a beginner or an experienced meditator. So hopefully you have a kettle and some nice tea ready, and you can join me for a cup together, and then you can enjoy some tea throughout this little chit chat. So thanks for coming. Some good tea. I'm drinking a tea that's a new tea we just started carrying about a week ago, called Reverie, and it's not aged. It's actually a new show pour, but I find it so calming to like the whole body. So it's nice to drink later in the day. At this time of year, I'm starting to drink a lot more oolong and green teas and lighter oxidized red teas, but because this is a new tea we just started carrying, I've been drinking it in the evening because it's just so, I find like it helps me to take the whole day. We've been doing a lot of work recently, getting all the details ready for this retreat we're hosting in August, that my mind is so active all day. So drinking some of this nice show pour I find very calming at the end of the day. It's also good to drink calming tea if you're going to give a talk about meditation. So, as most of you know who have attended some of these chats, I have a tendency to go off on tangents and digressions. So I wrote a couple notes this afternoon to help me stay on track. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves discussing things that have very little to do with meditation. So the first place I really want to start is to talk about the fact or the reality that meditation is not something that you only do in one area of your life. Really, if meditation isn't starting to drift into the rest of one's life, then it means that there's something about the type of meditation they're doing that needs to be refined or tweaked or changed. Because a real meditation practice, a consistent meditation practice, should continue to go to deeper and deeper levels of awareness, deeper levels of concentration, and we will come up against our limitations and blocks, and those are big opportunities for growth. Meditation should facilitate one coming up against their own limitations. In a lot of ways, I've found it to be the most effective and efficient way to come up against my own limitations psychologically, intellectually, emotionally, even physically, if you're doing longer sits, to come up to those edges and then go beyond them. So for those of you who got the Seasonal Tea Club, if you've received yours already, it's all about shamanism and tea, and one of the principles, actually I loaded a talk on shamanism from last week. One of the principles is exploring the edges. So the edges of a ecosystem, the edges of what are called transition zones. We also have our own edges. And by coming up to our edges, we start to discover our limitations and then to go past them. And that is the process in a practical definition of growth. So meditation is really part of that. And so why I wanted to start there is that tea is itself a moving meditation. I call it a moving meditation and a living art. And what makes it a moving meditation is that there aren't many other activities. I mean, especially in the East, we have activities like calligraphy, brush and ink painting. There's a beautiful book called The Zen of Archery, which is about archery as a form of meditation. And it starts with a beautiful kind of story about the master archer. And you also find this in Chuangzi, who is a Chinese philosopher. The master archer, if he misses the bullseye, the inferior archer blames the wind or the distraction or the bird that chirped or they didn't get enough sleep, or they go on and on with all the reasons why they didn't hit the bullseye. Whereas the master archer immediately looks within themselves for the fault. And in a lot of ways, the practice of meditation is the practice of learning, if you want to put it in kind of modern terms, installing the technology in our awareness to naturally turn inwards, to naturally look within ourselves for the things in our life that aren't going well, that we don't like, or just how we navigate our emotions or our psychological reflexes or responses or reactions to things that happen in life. Meditation is the natural cultivation of a new tendency. And that new tendency is to immediately go within. What is it that I did? What could I have done differently? As I like to say, and this is a saying out of our tradition, internalize everything, externalize nothing. So the lesson that so-and-so is a jerk, or that things never work out, or technology is always a pain in my neck, why doesn't it ever work, or whatever it is that we think is an external cause of things in our life, while they may play a role in it, rarely do we have much agency if we are looking outside ourselves for change, transformation, or the root cause of suffering. So when it just comes to creating joy, happiness, clarity, purpose, that all begins with our capacity for inner excavation and for developing greater capacities internally. So really at the root of meditation is installing this profound, almost wondrous, miraculous ability to start to turn inwards with everything, to turn inwards and look for the inner source of things. And also to recognize if we feel triggered by something, it means that there's something of that thing within us. So, we're human beings. We're always getting triggered by our girlfriend or boyfriend says something and it's really offensive, or that guy cuts us off in traffic, or that person butts us in line at the post office, whatever it might be. There's constant things that happen in life that are, quote, irritants. And the thing is, meditation helps create more spaciousness inside, so that when things happen externally, if we are triggered, we can start to recognize, as one of my teachers has said, you spot it, you got it. If it bugs you, or if that thing about the person, you don't like that thing about the person, or you get irritated, or whatever it is, rather than live with an external orientation, we begin to go, oh, I'm triggered. What an amazing gift this person has given me. Because if we're triggered, it means there's some area in ourselves that we can work through. And an example of this is, let's say somebody's really upset with you, but you don't feel triggered at all by them being upset with you. It usually means either you're a sociopath or a narcissist, which I doubt you guys are, women, rather. Usually, if there's no charge, it's their issue, right? It means that you don't have that in your psycho-emotional conditioning or in what's going on for you, so there's no charge. There's nothing to get you fired up. Whereas if you react, it means, oh, there's an area for me to work on it. Now, the thing is, working on it when the iron is hot. When the iron is hot, you can't, when you're charged, you can't work through something because our capacity to see the situation objectively and clearly is muddied, it's compromised. So my suggestion is, when you're upset in a situation, or you're even too excited about something and your energy is scattered, you wait until it's come back to a place of neutrality to address it. Meditation helps us get to neutrality much faster, but it also means when something's happening, there's a capacity to just step out of it a little bit and observe it. So for those of you who came to the meditation yesterday morning, I'll give the very abridged version, but I love in Seinfeld's show, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, the episode with Brian Fagan where they're talking about, Brian Fagan's talking about seeing his therapist, and he's like, it's so amazing. I go to this therapist, I dump all my problems, I give him $100 or 200 or whatever, and then I walk out and I just feel so much better. I feel much lighter. That, of course, is not really working on the issue at the core issue. It's just dumping your problems on somebody and then having them say a thing or two and you feel better about it. That is not what meditation is. Actually maybe talking to somebody about your problems, but then also going and doing something about it so that they don't continue to run our lives. For people who have a contemplative practice or an introspective practice, you notice the patterns keep coming up in your life. either in your close relationships or in your relationship to work or your relationship to your finances or to your health or whatever it is, they keep rearing their ugly head. And we have the tendency to go, oh, it's that thing. No, it's that thing. No, it's this thing. Instead of going, if it's the same pattern that keeps coming up in different ways, in all likelihood, the wise thing to do would go, what is it that I'm doing that keeps attracting these situations, keeps attracting those relationships, keeps attracting those things? There's some patterning in our energetic being that is attracting similar situations. Meditation is a way to go in and actually find where the edges and the corners and the patterns are, to bring them into the light of awareness where we can do something about them. So that's at the most general, basic level. And again, the reason I wanted to say that meditation isn't just this half an hour in the morning or in the morning and evening. Meditation is something that should start to affect your entire life. And tea as a meditation practice, and this talk isn't about tea, it's about meditation, so we're going to focus on that. But I do want to say one thing. Tea is a meditative practice if you treat it as a mindfulness practice, because it requires concentration, especially if you want to brew better and better tea and learn different brewing methods. It is about using one's attention and developing the ability to observe oneself whilst doing something. So can you be aware of the sensation of the kettle in your hand? Can you observe it and feel the weight of it in the body? Can you feel if it's pinching the chi and obstructing the flow of energy? Can you start to develop a sensitivity to water such that you know, based on the steam or the sound of the water stones, how loud they are and the way they're rumbling, what the temperature of the water is? Can you develop that level of subtlety and attention? Even at the level of the senses. The more attentive, the more meditative the practice of tea is, you will notice things in the aroma, the flavor, in the cha chi, the energy, the feeling, the sensation that you would never notice unless you made it a very mindful practice. So as a mindfulness practice, tea can teach us how to bring the meditative mind, what we call the tea mind, into movement, into activity, and into our lives. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is that there's a practice called pausing, which we integrate a lot into tea. And what that means is that between each aspect of tea drinking, we stop and pause, and you return to the center of your being. There's some practices that focus on the lower dantian, which is below the belly button, about an inch below the belly button, bringing the attention back to this area, taking a couple breaths, and then moving on to the next thing. So in this case, the next thing might be, can I pour a cup of tea where it doesn't end where my hand touches the pot, it ends, the pot is an extension of my hand and my energy. It's one continuum. And then as that finishes, can I pause and allow the internal dialogue, because I'm probably going to start drifting off, just come back to my interior space. Take a deep breath, let go of the tension, and then move on to the next thing. So in this case, it would be drinking some tea. And between each activity, pausing. Again, you'll notice that if you do this, it might start to drift into the rest of your life. You pause between one activity and another, which is giving space for more mindfulness and more presence in your activities. In one of the traditions I've studied, they say that one has achieved a higher level of unification of being, of the self, unification of the self, when part of their attention is always internal, which means you're doing the dishes, you're walking the dog, you're driving your car, you're having a conversation. Some part of your attention is observing your thoughts, your gestures, your attitude, your communication. Are you talking really fast? Are you really excited? Are you calm and a little lethargic? Are you kind of disengaged and not really paying that much attention? Do you not really care that much about what's going on? it's some part of the attention is always observing one's interior life. And that the attention is split between managing one's exterior life and also observing what's happening inside of them. And that there's a level of self-cultivation where some part of the attention is always internal. So you're never unconscious. You're never unaware of what's going on inside. That is a very high level of capacity and a high level of development. And it's really intended more as a goal. I mean, if you're going to beat yourself up or judge yourself for not being totally aware of your interior life 24 hours a day, that would make you'd be very frustrated, because we spend a lot of our lives falling asleep, daydreaming, just thinking about the future, drifting into the past. So this ability to be really conscious and aware in our daily lives is very profound. There are so many blessings that come out of that. There's so many gifts that come out of the greater awareness. And a practice of tea and this practice of pausing between things can start to affect the rest of your life. So the last thing I want to kind of say on that topic is, I had a teacher once who, I don't have a lot of experience with Sufism. I've read some of the great Sufi poets, but this teacher had a lot of experience with Sufism. And they said that one of their practices is, they said, in our lives, we're constantly going in and out of doorways. So we're always entering new spaces, entering your bedroom, entering the kitchen, leaving the house, entering a shop, entering a school or a friend's house or what have you. And then we also are going in and out of doorways in our life, in and out of a relationship, in and out of new jobs, in and out of new stages of life. And this idea of doorways, of passageways, of thresholds is very significant and profound symbolically, right? We're always entering through doorways. You could even say the state between meditation, a practice in the morning, as you're coming into your meditation practice and you're leaving it, that's passing in and out of a threshold. They're two different states of being that you're attending to. So this teacher said, there's this practice in Sufism, he said, when we meet the threshold, we pause and we find ourselves. And it's such a simple saying, but it's so beautiful. As we meet a threshold, we pause and we find ourselves. So this is another practice. It's like a little alarm clock. You can try to integrate it into your life when you go in and out of a space. And it might be big spaces. If it's every time you go in and out of the bathroom, for example, you'll forget, or just you'll be like, I'm over it. This is too much. But maybe it's whenever you leave your house or your apartment, or you come home, or maybe it's, when you enter a building or a business, or you can decide on your own terms. But try to set a little, almost like a mental reminder, a little dog ear in the story of your life. And the dog ear is, when I enter a space, let me remember myself. Take a snapshot, like a Polaroid, of, is my mind here? Are my emotions here? Am I calm? Am I clear? Am I agitated? And you might notice, as you develop greater sensitivity to it, when you're around one person, you feel a little on edge. Your shoulders are a little tight. You're a little tense. Your eyes are a little squinted. You're not totally relaxed and present. So this stopping at the threshold is, let me just take a snapshot, see my mind, see my emotional state, and notice my attitude. So, for example, with your attitude, often when we feel a slight sense of superiority with somebody, which can also come out of insecurity, we tend to raise our chin and look down at them when we talk to them. And when we're feeling a little bit intimidated, or maybe we look up to the person, literally, we oftentimes will bring our chin down a little bit. Or if we feel guilty, or if we're being dishonest. So for example, if you have a dog, you'll notice if they've done something wrong and they know they've done something wrong, they'll lower their eyes, right? And they look up. This is a natural thing. Our body gestures, and this will relate to postures in meditation, which I'll talk about in a bit. Our body gestures speak so much to our internal attitude and orientation to the situation or the person or whatever. So we can learn a lot about how we really feel about something just by observing. Are we a little bit avoidant? Are we like not willing to look direct? Are we standing, like you might notice if you don't feel really safe with somebody. And I think from talking to people, I think women sometimes feel less safe with men if they feel like they have energy that's not clear sexually. That they might cover their heart, they're protecting their heart, or they might cover their breasts, or you might stand. This applies to men and women, but they might stand with their legs kind of like crossed, or we naturally, instinctively feel and read the energy of life because we're part of it. And I believe that everybody is a deeply sensitive human being, but we tend to shut down a lot of that sensitivity in our life because maybe because of less exposure and time in nature, or maybe because, especially living in a city, there's so much stimulation and so much happening that if you're energetically and emotionally wide open all the time, it can just be an overwhelming experience. So a lot of what we develop in meditation, Goenkaji or Goenka, who teaches Vipassana meditation, he passed away, I think about 9 years ago. He's an extraordinary teacher, and Vipassana meditation is such a powerful practice. If you ever get 10 days and you can go sit a 10-day course, I profoundly recommend it. Goenkaji says, the bird to freedom, there are two wings. And one wing is the wing of awareness or sensitivity, we could say. And the other wing is equanimity. And if you have just equanimity, then you're like you're like a drug addict, you're like a pothead. You're kind of just like, blah, like you're just totally equanimous, no sensitivity, no emotions. That's not what we're going for. You want equanimity, but you also want bright wakefulness. And that is the sensitivity, the awareness. So we have to have equal parts awareness and sensitivity to develop deeper internal exploration and stillness and centeredness and capacity. But we also need that equanimity, equipoise. If you're always reacting to everything in life, then your emotions are all over the place and the personality is always reacting to things. If we're coming from that place, it's very hard to develop a deep and meaningful meditation practice. And that's a good segue into the next part that I want to talk about, which is the beginning of meditation begins with virtue. I'm going to pause and have a cup of tea here. I'll have a sip of tea. So having a meditation practice while the rest of your life is a mess is counterproductive. So if people are suffering from real addictions or toxic relationships, or their diet isn't clean, or they go to bed at 4 a.m. every night and their sleep cycles are out of whack, or they don't have work that they find meaningful and fulfilling for them, or they have some unresolved, unhealed trauma and emotional distress that they have not worked through, then they might need to do some real healing work and get some of the foundations of their life in place in order to develop a real meditation practice. Now, meditation, of course, can help with overcoming a lot of those things or getting aligned with what it means to live a healthy life, a healthy lifestyle. But in order to go really to deeper and deeper levels of meditation, the other areas of a person's life have to be kind of sorted out, There's a reason that if you go to a Buddhist or a Taoist monastery, or even like the Christian contemplative traditions, it's maybe the Trappist monks or the Benedictines or something, there is a reason why they live the way they do. It's not because, in a lot of cases, they might be great lovers of silence and solitude and stillness and abstemiousness with eating and, the avoidance of vices. But in a lot of ways, it's creating the conditions that are conducive to spiritual growth and to a strong meditation practice. Because if you're living in your life's kind of messy in all these different ways, and you're stressed out all the time, it's really hard to have to develop a deeper meditation practice. So some of this comes into alignment with what I call virtue, and the cultivation of virtue. Virtue naturally comes out of meditation, but virtue also is a doorway into meditation. So they work together. And I gave a talk that's on the website on this idea of virtue. And the one thing I'll say about it is that virtue is not the same as morality, and it's not the same as ethics. Both of those are wonderful and fine things, but oftentimes those come from an externally imposed idea about how we ought to be, as opposed to how we really are. So be kind and charitable because that's what you're supposed to do, as opposed to actually cultivating an inner feeling of selflessness and charitable mindset and kindness and seva, or service to others. That takes cultivation internally to develop that kind of virtuous approach to life. So cultivating virtue is central to a life of meditation. Okay, so the teachings of meditation that I am coming from in terms of my experience, just to give you some context, are of the Vipassana Buddhist tradition, Taoist practice, Zen Buddhism, and the Hermetic tradition, specifically in the lineage of a teacher named Franz Barden, who died 60 years ago. Franz Barden left us some books, and currently there's a man named Martin Folks who's gone very deep into Barden's work and teaches from there. So I'm going to share some ideas from those different traditions, and specifically more from Martin Folks' teachings around meditation, because I think he's got some very good practical advice. So some people would say that the aim of meditation, the goal, if you want to put it in those terms, is samadhi, satori, nirvana, dhyana, in Western terms, beatific vision, right? Or in shamanic terms, the mystic death, the death of the ego, and the emergence of the true self, or in Hinduism, what you'd call the Brahman. So there's Atman and Brahman. It's like the soul and the spirit. And the mystic death would be the death of the personality and the emergence or the flowering of pure consciousness and living one's life from that space. So different traditions have different ideas about the point of meditation. In Zen, they would say there's no aim, there's no point of meditation. The point of meditation is to align yourself with and be with reality as it is. Not as we think it is, not as we believe it is, not as we see reality through filters. Anais Nin, who some of you may know, this French writer, I don't know how much meditation she did, but she does have a lot of insight. And she says, we don't see the world the way it is, we see the world the way we are. And I think that's quite true and quite profound. Rarely do we see life as it actually exists. We see it through filters of perception, and those filters are based on our experience, our education, our conditioning, our upbringing, our group of friends, our colleagues, our profession, and our whole identity and personality. All of that is coming into play and creating a very strong filter between us and reality, and sometimes we get a little glimpse, right? We're like, oh, that's actually what's going on. But a lot of the time we're seeing life through so many layers and filters. So in Zen, meditation practice over a long time, yes, there is the intention of the alleviation of suffering, but part of the alleviation of suffering is just to see life as it is, without any desire to change it, to make it any different. Just to see life as it truly is, and to abstain from the need to change anything. And that doesn't mean, one of the greatest social activists is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was a Zen monk. And he was first known for his writings, and he was very active during the Vietnam War. And he did a lot of peaceful protest. And he was pro-peace more than he was anti-war. But so that isn't to say that cultivating a capacity to see life as it is without the need to change it, or without the desire to change it, doesn't mean you can't have a stance around issues of injustice or environmental degradation or what have you. It just means that the internal space is accepting life as it is, being at peace with life as it is, being at peace with yourself as you are, and seeing yourself as you are. So seeing yourself more objectively instead of through all your ideas about who you are. You know, sometimes if you were to ask maybe some people who you care about, tell me the 5 things you love the most about me and the 5 things you like the least about me, which I think can be quite a helpful exercise if people are willing to be very honest with you. If they were totally honest and they knew you relatively well, most of us would be quite surprised by their answers. You know, we might say, oh, I didn't even see that at all. And so our ability to see ourselves clearly is very difficult. It's challenging to see ourselves clearly. And sometimes when we have those moments that are kind of, you know, where we're confronted potentially with death or with illness or the loss of a family member or the end of a relationship, and you have to come to terms with why did somebody break up with me or something like that, and all of a sudden we see ourselves maybe more clearly, or we see ourselves the way another person sees us, it can be quite startling, because you go, I thought I knew myself so well, but apparently there's these blind spots. So we all have blind spots. Meditation can really help us to see those blind spots in a meaningful way. So on one level, it's seeing life more clearly. It's developing concentration and insight, or prajna, prajna, insight. At the highest level, you would say samadhi, nirvana, satori, you know, achieving levels of liberation from the ego and liberation from, you know, in some of the Eastern traditions, the bondage of the rounds of reincarnation, of transmigration from one lifetime to the next. And this is where we start to have differences between, say, Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. In one school, they believe when you're liberated, when you achieve nirvana, you're done with the cycle of rebirth. Whereas in the Mahayana tradition, the bodhisattva is one who, even though they're enlightened, they choose to keep reincarnating in a human body to help alleviate the suffering of all beings, until all beings are alleviated of all suffering, are relieved from suffering, which is quite a beautiful vow to make, you know, the liberation of all suffering. So, you know, meditation is as old as civilization. It is part of every spiritual tradition since before the Egyptians. You know, when you see in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, you know, Set or Thoth or these different Egyptian gods, they're sitting with their knees at a perfect right stance, with their backs straight in a straight chair, and they're usually holding an ankh in one hand and like beads of some sort in another hand. Often they have the head of an animal, you know, like an ibis head or something. But they're sitting in a meditation posture called the throne posture. So, you know, all the way back to ancient Egypt and before, meditation is central to all the different spiritual traditions. It's essential to all the traditions. So, in one sense, the aim in meditation I was talking about earlier, but it's the ability to fully dedicate oneself to an endeavor. So you could say meditation isn't only sitting in silence with the eyes closed, focusing on the breath. Any activity that we're engaged in where we are bringing the entirety of our concentration, the entirety of our awareness, and the entirety of our body and being to that activity, that's a meditative activity. And when we see great masters of anything, whether it's making a teapot or painting, or even an author or writer. Writers who get to a really inspired place, and I know you've read some writing where you're just so moved by the writing, it feels like it's coming from another level of genius, creative genius. Oftentimes, those, or even watching, Michael Jordan play basketball, when they talk in sports about the flow state, these are all meditative practices in the sense that you are totally absorbed in the activity. Last year I loved watching this documentary called The Last Dance about the Chicago Bulls. You don't have to be a basketball fan to appreciate this. It was about the Chicago Bulls when Jordan and Pippen and Dennis Rodman, everybody were playing together, and they won 6 championships, and they were just an unstoppable force. Nobody had seen an athletic team work together this way. And Phil Jackson, their coach, had a lot of training in shamanic Native American practices, but also in Zen. And he incorporated a lot of those teachings into his coaching of that team. I don't know, I think he put it in his own terminology, but a lot of it was teaching the team to work as one, to not see themselves as separate individuals going about playing basketball and it's about how good they are and getting attention. He said, we're all one organism working together. And you could say on a macro level, a lot of meditation, we can experience states of the lines between the self and reality blur. The ego drops out, and we start to feel our connected oneness to all of nature, to all animals, all sentient beings, and all the energy that makes up the universe. And that might sound a little esoteric, but this is a very common experience for people who have a very strong meditation practice, where they start to transcend the limitations of the self. The self begins to disappear. And then there's an identification, if you want to call it that, with an awareness of the interdependence and interreality of all beings and all life. That's quite a profound experience for people to have. So I'm not saying that the Chicago Bulls, as they were winning these championships, were having Satori enlightenment experiences. But when you hear Michael Jordan talk about these games where he realized that they were going to lose, something would shift in him, and he would say, all of a sudden, he couldn't hear the crowd, the thousands of people screaming. He wasn't aware of the scoreboard or how much time there was on the clock. He went into a kind of flow state, and he said it was like the defense went into slow motion. And if you watch those games, this documentary is so good. Even if you don't like sports, it's so inspiring and wonderful. Jordan said everything went into slow motion, and running around players and scoring 60 out of 100 points, for the game. He said it was like everybody was barely moving, and I could just run around them and jump over them. And this feeling of going into slow motion is almost like a deep meditative absorption, a deep state. They've set up things to track the brain waves of serious meditators who have been meditating for 50 years. And they're noticing that the brain activity is such that, and the meditators describe it this way, it's like reality goes into slow motion. And in some ways, you could say that's almost like bending time. Imagine if your days actually felt more like, 200 hours, because you were so mindful of everything happening. It was in slow motion. So when an average person experiences 1 hour of time, that's like 5 hours of time for somebody who's deeply absorbed in life. On the flip side, you could say an artist, right, can get really absorbed in something, and 10 hours can pass, and they look up from their keyboard and it's dark out and all the lights are out, and they just say they've gone somewhere else. They've been totally absorbed in the activity. And so in a lot of ways, these are descriptions of the meditative state. And if it's not just seated meditation, maybe there's something in your life that you really enjoy and you really love. Doing that with full attention is a practice of meditation. And the better and better we become at anything, the more we can go into these absorbed states, the more easily we can access these deep meditative states in the practice of what we love. And that's all the more reason why we must practice what we enjoy over and over and over again until we develop real proficiency with it. If somebody's learning how to play guitar, for years they're going to be learning chords and their fingers don't have the dexterity, and they're not going to reach some creative channel state in all likelihood with that limited capacity. But as they get more and more proficient, then they can start to open themselves up and let the mind go, and then they can start to access higher levels of creativity that we also can access through meditation. The mind must become clear and bright and at ease and utterly at comfort. The state we're looking for is one of deep calm, deep relaxation, and a joyful, bright wakefulness. And one way to access that is through the breath, because the breath can control whether we're in the sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system. Through deep, mindful breathing, over time, we can settle all the energy in the body. One description is, if you want a lake to be calm, you don't get in the lake and start trying to slap all the waves down, right? If you become calm, the lake itself becomes calm. And when it becomes calm, that's when you can see the bottom of what's on the bottom of the lake. So again, it's about calming down. It's about letting go. It's not about forcing yourself into some state. It's really about letting go. Tension prevents us from being fully present onto the task or the focus. So if we have tension in the body, if we have tension in the mind, if we have tension in the heart, in our relationships, for example, or we're unhappy with our work, that tension disallows us from actually reaching a place of deep relaxation. So as you try and meditate, if you just notice the mind will not calm down, it will not calm down. You come back to the breath, it won't calm down. Maybe consider looking at the areas in your life that are bringing a lot of tension, and you can write about it and start to try and address those. The more our life is clear and we can have a clear heart without grudges or frustrations or irritations, the deeper our capacity to reach deeper levels of meditation. Holding tension, confusion, or conflict in our lives makes it very hard to develop a really deep meditation practice. One thing I want to mention, there are a lot of tremendous health benefits in meditation. Alleviation from anxiety and depression are two of the most common. But also physical healing. Oftentimes when people develop a real meditation practice, they find that they start healing naturally from physical ailments. I know that for me that has certainly happened. I had a fairly significant illness at one point in my life from working too much, and got really sick. And it really, once I started meditating a lot, that illness resolved itself of its own accord. I think it's because the stress was I was holding so much tension from the stress and the overwork and the adrenal exhaustion and the fatigue, but I kept working. And eventually meditation really, among other things, really helped me heal from that process. Lower blood pressure, which is a byproduct of everything I was talking about, and coming into contact with one's purpose. There is an incredible, vivifying, contagious, powerful force that comes into our lives when we're really aligned with our purpose. And a lot of people don't know what their purpose is, and that's a cause of deep sadness or frustration in life because they just don't know why they're here. They want their lives to matter. They want to have a positive impact on the world, but they don't know how exactly, and they don't know what it means or what is their unique gift that they want to offer to life. Sometimes that's because they're too distracted by how I mean, the world is a distracting and loud place right now. You could be distracted every 3 seconds with all the technology and everything. Oftentimes, if we can just create space for our natural, what we call Ming, or the contract with heaven, our purpose to naturally emerge, it will come when we start to meditate a lot. And a lot could be 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night. That creates very fertile conditions to start to feel, I feel really inclined to go in this direction, or to explore this thing, or to reach out to that person, or to volunteer at this place, or maybe I'll take a part-time internship at this place, or maybe you already are in alignment with what your purpose is, but you haven't refined it down to like, this is the thing. This is really what it is. Again, meditation, because it clears out a lot of the BS. It clears out a lot of the noise and the conflict. And it helps heal the conditioning. You know, all of us, our parents had expectations of what they thought. Not all of us. I will speak for myself. My parents certainly had expectations about what they thought I should do in life. And consciously or unconsciously, those expectations definitely impacted me. And truth be told, I wanted to go to school for traditional Chinese medicine and herbalism, to study Tai Chi, Qigong, martial arts. Like, I felt deeply called to these things from age 16. And I didn't go to school for Chinese medicine until I was 30 years old. And a lot of that was because I still had all these voices in my head of expectations about what I should be doing. And I was always trying to fit what I wanted to do within the model of what I thought was socially acceptable, or what have you. And it made me really unhappy for a lot of my 20s, because I wasn't just pursuing what felt truly, essentially important to me. And when I had done enough meditation and enough work, I was able to say, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm just going to pursue the life that's true to me. And it's made all the difference, you know? It's what's aligned me with all of the power and all the energy. I don't mean power like, power. I mean power of the universe, because when we get aligned with what we're meant to do here, with this precious life energy we have, that unlocks all sorts of doorways for energy to come into us. And there's a supportive energy from the intelligence of the universe when we align with that. And I feel that meditation profoundly facilitates arriving at that clarity and really refining that clarity. So that's a part, that is a significant, you could call it a health benefit, but the health benefit is when you're aligned with your life and you're aligned with the integrity of who you are, then natural health starts to emerge, because you've got all this extra energy because you're doing what you love. And that is part of meditation. So there are different types of meditation. There's seated meditation. There is walking meditation. Like you see this in the Zen tradition. Like Thich Nhat Hanh has these beautiful walks, mindful walks, where you walk slowly with a breath with each step. This is beautiful to do in the forest or in nature. And you keep the mind on the breathing and the sensation of the feet on the ground, and you try to remain aware of your entire environment. There's the use of mala, which I have been talking about more in the morning meditations. Using the mala to stay connected with counting the breath for 108 beads, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Mala is also used for prayer beads. There's the use of mantra. So you see this a lot in transcendental meditation, which, David Lynch and Russell Brand have kind of made popular, and the Beatles, right? Transcendental meditation. Also, Amma. Some of you may have heard of Amma, who's an Indian saint who lives in southern India. She gives people a mantra, and you repeat the mantra over and over, which again gives the mind something to do. Also, mantras carry vibrational energy. They're powerful. And I'll say a little more about that later. All of these are really tools. They are mental aids to help us develop greater focus. They're tools to help develop greater focus. But all these different forms of meditation, they share one goal in common, which is developing total focus and total awareness. Like I said, I mean, I use the example of playing basketball. Meditation can be anything, but it also, when we're talking about traditional meditation, we're talking about seated meditation, walking meditation, and sometimes using these tools to aid in the practice. So I want to talk a little bit about, and this is something I did some meditations on the website on the 5 elements, and I did one on the 4 elements because those are coming out of 2 different systems. You can check those out if you want, but in the Hermetic tradition, we have the earth element, which represents consolidation, stability, stillness, imperturbability, immovability. So we have the image here of a mountain, and this idea of sustained focus and attention. So in Hermetic meditation, one of the first stages is working with the earth element. It's developing deep, sustained immovability. In Pali, in the Buddhist tradition, we talk about aditan, which is strong determination. And what that means is to sit without moving, total stillness for a long period of time. And the earth element consolidates, it's stable, it's strong. You know, when you see a mountain, it's not going anywhere. It's going to stay there for a while. And that's what are the qualities we're seeking when we're cultivating the earth element in our practice. This requires overcoming major disturbances and traumas that affect our ability to focus. So like I said earlier, oftentimes we have healing work to do in order to start to access deeper states of meditation. And then we have the water element, which deals with the flow of the emotions. You know, our emotions just flow. Somebody says something and we immediately feel emotions. We see a sunset, we feel emotions. You know, somebody can say one word on a film, and if that word is delivered with real gravitas and depth of emotion, we cry. You know, we feel the emotions just flow. That is their nature. That's why, for example, in the tarot, the cup which holds water or wine, right, represents the flow of the emotions, and the cups represent the emotional body. The emotions also are like the flow of the unconscious and the flow of the mind. It's all things that flow respond to the water element. The water element tends towards what is lowly, what is humble. We say the water represents modesty and humility because it flows to places that other things don't want to go. But water is incredibly powerful. Look at the Grand Canyons. Look at all the great canyons of the world. They were carved over a long period of time by the force of water, right? Water also takes all different forms. So water meditation is about becoming part of the flow and allowing the attention to magnetically flow towards the object of attention. So we would choose an object of attention that we want to focus on. And when we developing the water element, we are magnetizing our attention towards that thing that we're focused on, and it's flowing in that direction. So I'm not going to say too much more about that because it's hard to do that without getting into more minutia of Hermetic practice. But it's really about setting an object and letting the mind flow towards the object. It also has to do with developing a smooth and undisturbed breathing. So when we start a meditation practice, if you're observing the breath, you might notice if it's too fast, it's because we're holding aggression in the body. If it's too slow, it might be because we're tired in life and we're exhausted, or there's some respiratory compromise, or there's a lot of grief. I'm going to talk about posture a little bit later, but often when you see people who have a lot of sadness or a lot of grief in their lives, their shoulders are hunched in, you know, or they're very protected of their shoulder, or sometimes they kind of have this energy. I'm exaggerating because if somebody looked like this, you'd say there's something wrong with them, their physical health. They need help. They need some acupuncture needles, right? But energetically, it's this kind of energy, right? People who slump, slump a lot. Oftentimes there's some grief or sadness that's unresolved. So a healthy water element, these are people, when you talk to them, they tend to flow. They go with the flow. They're flexible. If the plans change, they're like, cool, that's great. Other people who are more like wood or metal element, if you change the plans, they get very upset. They can't go with the flow. So we're cultivating these elemental energies through meditation, and then they transfer into the way we live our lives, which is about harmony and balance, right? So then we have the air element. The air is about deep absorption, where the mind and the object of the mind, the object of observation, are becoming one. Air passes through all things. This is very deep absorption. It's deep. That's really working with concentration, the nature of the mind. Through, like I was saying, those tools like mantra or focus on the breath, over a long time, the mind can go into deeper and deeper and deeper states of absorption into the focus of what you're focusing on. There's a lot of power that comes with the ability to focus deeply on something. Working with the air element, all aspects of the personality have to be under control. So if you have something where occasionally you just have to go out and just get inebriated, or there's like an addiction that's not being dealt with, or there's a tendency to fly off the handle and argue with people, or there's just aspects of the personality that really are not resolved. They really need some work. They need help. That area that is unresolved is going to prevent one from going to those deeper states of absorption with the air element. So part of meditation, like I said, is working through our layers of personality. And then the fire element is something we refer to as nirvikalpa samadhi, which is absorption without seed. And what this means is the self no longer exists. So just as heat from fire becomes one with the object, right? If you hold fire to something, it absorbs it becomes the thing. This concept of the fire element is what transforms. When we merge fully with the subject or the object of concentration, so it could be the breath, for example, you are the breath, or the self becomes, there's no distinction between the self and the object, or the subject and the object. This is what's called total absorption. And we've become the task itself, unhindered by the self for any obstruction. So, fire absorption is a very high state of meditation. And I'm more referencing these elements to suggest that we can explore these states through meditation. If you want to explore the elements specifically as part of meditation, you might check out a book called Initiation into Hermetics, which is written by Franz Barden, because he's organized all the meditation practices around the elements. But you can also look at the sutras of Patanjali, right? The Yoga Sutras, the basic Yoga Sutras. In the Vedic system, they work with the elements, of course. In the Taoist system, we work with the elements. The Buddhist system has elements. And they all have different ways of using those as aspects of meditation. So if you want suggestions on books or ideas, feel free to mention that a little later. Okay, so I want to just go briefly into posture and then some of those tools that I had mentioned. The first thing I'll say about posture is that what we do in life, we carry into our meditation. And what we do in meditation, we carry into our life. That's a theme. I realize I've said it a couple times. But the reason I say it is that it's an important theme. If we can observe ourselves in meditation, you will notice that the things that you do in meditation, you also do in life. But what's profound about observing them in meditation is you can actually see them. Whereas in day-to-day life, we usually don't really see some of our tendencies and our patterns of how we behave or how we think. if we have a tendency to complain in life or to play the victim, then oftentimes we will either make excuses about not having time to meditate, or why it's too hard, or what we don't like about it, or it's annoying to get up earlier in the morning, or when we're actually sitting, it's complaining about it's uncomfortable for my back or my legs. These things we can start to see. If you really observe yourself in meditation, you'll realize the patterns that come up in meditation are also coming up in life. But again, in meditation, we can start to undo those patterns. We can unlearn them, so to speak. Most of our mental barriers carry over in meditation as well. So like I mentioned, breathing. If you're observing the breath and you're breathing fast, it might be because you're also too aggressive in life. And why are you aggressive in life? Maybe because you feel like you've been taken advantage of or exploited or something in life, or somebody's been abusive to you, and the way that you have to get through life is be aggressive. You've got to be dominant and aggressive. Those people, when they sit and they start developing a meditation practice, they'll observe their breath is not really smooth, slow. The breath is, it's got an energy, it's got a charge to it. So we start to observe these subtle patterns in meditation, and then we can see, okay, what does that look like in the way that I'm living my life? Or you start to notice, as you try to relieve the tension, the scalenes, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the deltoids, the trapezius, the areas we hold tension, which is from stress in life, but also we tend to spend a lot of our lives like that, right? So all that tightness, as we try to straighten the spine and find the right posture for meditation, it's hard to actually let the shoulders release, to open the chest and open the heart, or the chin keeps coming up, and that might be this attitude of that you need to be confident in a way that's kind of arrogant, or it's kind of like posturing to get through life, as opposed to that kind of quiet, self-assured confidence, which is a healthy expression of confidence. It's a puffed up confidence. Or you might notice you're always puffing your chest out like a rooster, right? And that's, maybe men do that more than women do. But it's when we observe these different things in our meditation, you will start to, as you go deeper and deeper into meditation, this is how I am in life. This is the way I live my life. And that can be profoundly insightful for helping you navigate life circumstances, because you can start to work on it. So in terms of posture, I just want to go over this. I usually go over this at the beginning of the Thursday morning meditations, but I just want to mention these things because they're kind of meditation 101. They're fundamentals, right? The first thing is we'll talk from the head down. From the crown, there's a acupuncture point called Do 20. It's on the channel that runs up the back, and it's right in the top of the head, right here. You can feel like a little string. I like to imagine a little gold string going up to like a star above you, or maybe to the roof, and it's straight above, and you should feel a little tug kind of coming up, and that is going straight down through the spine, and then down through the perineum and down into the earth. And that little string, again, it's pulled taut, but if it's pulled too tight, we often like to use the metaphor of an instrument. I like a string instrument because most people know. If the strings are too tight, they're out of tune and they'll break, they'll snap. And that's like this intense, I'm going to meditate, So that tightness will get in the way of being able to be fluid and open. Too tight and it snaps. Too loose it doesn't produce any sound, right? If you're too loose, you're just chill, man. Just relaxed. I'm totally relaxed. I'm relaxing. I'm meditating. Then you fall asleep is what you do. So we're not going for falling asleep. We're also not going for intense. So it should be, right, it's called the middle way for a reason. It's just the perfect level of tension. And when you feel it because something just locks in. You go, here we are. like an instrument that's perfectly tuned. And you can relate to your body and your breath and your awareness as tuning an instrument. You're literally tuning the instrument of the body to get it into perfect tune, perfect balance and harmony. So the chin is tucked. When you tuck the chin, you're not just tucking it like that, like straight up and down. You're tucking it because you're pulling from the occiput, the back of the head is pulled up slightly, and you'll notice this movement. So when you just let your head kind of relax, and then pull up slightly with the back of the head, and you'll notice it does something. It brings the entire spine, it pulls the whole spine up and back a little bit. And when you do that, it rolls you forward on the tailbone. So you should notice that if your hips, if you think of your hips like this, right? You should imagine that on top of the hips is a glass of water. And you want them to be just flat so that the water doesn't spill. Now, if you notice, for example, let your back muscles totally relax. Your hips go like this. They drop. The water spills. If you're rolled way too forward, there's too much forward tilt. So really what you want is you're on top of your sit bones. So you should have a pillow, and then underneath the pillow, a flat pillow, and then a round pillow on top. This is called a zafu and a zabatan. So you're sitting on your pillow. I like to roll forward on the pillow, so I actually sit on the front of it. And that allows me to sit forward on my tailbone, to roll my hips forward, and you can feel the point at which they come to a flat point. And then the spine is straight. The back of the head, the occiput, comes back slightly. The chin tucks, and then you feel the slight tug upwards and downwards. Now, that, generally speaking, is the foundation. The shoulders then should be open, but not too open. What I do is I roll them back, and then you let them drop, and they'll naturally fall to a comfortable position. The arms are to the side of the body. Some people like to sit with the hands on the knees. In traditional Zen practice, you sit with the palms on top of each other and the thumbs just gently touching. D.T. Suzuki says a piece of paper should be able to slide just between the thumbs because they're touching so gently. When they're touching so gently, it means you have to be aware. Otherwise, they're going to collapse or they're going to fall down. This posture, what's called Dhyana Mudra, Mudra of wisdom, can then sit in your lap tucked up against your belly. And then it sits down in the lap. You'll notice when you do this, it makes it easier to kind of bring the chest forward. The elbows rest just gently against the body as the chin tucks. And now you're just stable. You're immovable. You are, what was the word that I really, imperturbable. This is an imperturbable position. We say sit like a mountain and train like a beast. So this is sitting like a mountain. Now, this position allows the energy to flow up the spine and then down the front of the body, down through the throat, the heart, the belly button, down through the pelvic section. Then it comes down around the tailbone, and the energy then comes back, up the spine, up and over the head, back down the front. And that's what's called the Microcosmic Orbit. And there, of course, what are called chakras in the Indian system, or the dantian, little vortexes of energy. In some of the more advanced meditations, we bring the energy through these energy centers to allow them to open up. And they're described as lotus flowers. And each petal on the lotus represents an aspect of consciousness. As these centers open, they impart throughout our awareness the different consciousness of that energy center. So the throat, the voice, creativity, manifestation, etc. That microcosmic orbit meditation when we are seated properly, when the posture is right, the energy starts to flow naturally. When you bring attention and intention, where attention goes, energy flows. When you start to do the meditations with the breath into the microcosmic orbit, it starts to build the psychic muscles of the chakras, and more energy, more consciousness can flow through these centers, and they start to open. And this is the basis also of Kundalini practices, right? To open the Sushumna and the Ida and the Pingala Nadi, the sun and the moon channels, to open them and to strengthen these centers so that more and more energy can flow through them. So, of course, different traditions have different practices, but in the Taoist system, in the Shaivik and Kundalini practices, a lot of it's about opening up this channel and getting energy flowing through it. I will do a specific video on those practices. So this is called the Microcosmic Orbit. Now, the Macrocosmic Orbit is another Taoist practice where you're not only doing this central channel, but you're also doing all the meridians that run, the yin meridians run up the legs and up the body, and then down the arms, and up the arms, and then up through the head, and then back down the back. And you do this whole circuit. And I've done some of these meditations in the class. That's a more advanced meditation. But with those, you're opening up energy and awareness and clearing the stagnation, and you're running prana or chi or life force through all the meridians of the body. This happens naturally through Tai Chi and Qigong practice, but we can also do it through seated meditation. And it's a very profound practice when that energy starts to flow through the body like that. So, in terms of, I want to just mention 5 different postures that start from kind of beginner level postures and then more advanced. The first is with your back against the wall in the Indian style. And this doesn't require a lot of flexibility, and it's good for longer sits. You can put your hands on the knees because it's easier for a lot of people than having them like this. So the back is against a flat wall, and the legs are just sitting, the way you would sit in what's called Indian style, right? Where they're just sitting cross-legged like that, right? On the ground. This is the most comfortable position for people who are not flexible. They haven't done a lot of meditation, and they're building up their flexibility. So they can actually sit for a while. I have my cousin who I just love to death. He wants to get more and more into meditation, and he's been trying over the years, but he's really tall and his legs are really tight and his hamstrings are really tight, and he doesn't stretch or practice yoga. So he always sits and he's like, I want to meditate, but I spend the entire time just going, I wish my legs didn't hurt. I wish my legs didn't hurt. And I joke around with him. I say, well, maybe that would be a good mantra for you. So like hurting legs, hurting legs, hurting legs, or something. Or I guess it would be releasing legs, relaxed legs, something like that. But for him, this is really the only way that he can sit comfortably, and his back gets so sore that he has to be against a wall. So that's the first way. Oh, there's one last thing I wanted to mention about general posture. The tip of the tongue can touch the roof of the mouth where the hard palate meets the teeth. So it can touch right there. And the reason you're doing that is it connects the energetic channel that runs down the front of the body and the back of the body. It connects at that point. There's an acupuncture point there. So by keeping the tongue there and the teeth just gently touching, right? You don't want them tight. You don't want them too loose. Some people, breathe through the mouth, but in every tradition I've studied of meditation, the mouth is closed, the teeth are gently touching, the tongue touches the roof of the mouth, and you're breathing through the nose. You're observing the breath in and out of the nostrils. Okay, so the first posture, seated with the back against something. The second posture, I mentioned earlier, the throne posture. So this is sitting in a chair. You can either sit forward on the chair more without your back touching the back of the chair, or sometimes for older people, if they have weak backs, they can sit with their back against the chair, the back of the chair. Ideally, it's a straight back. the main thing is you want the knees to touch, which for some people can be uncomfortable for the iliotibial band and the outside of the hips. But with practice, it gets easier and easier. I also sometimes like to just practice like that, to sit in a chair. It's also a nice way to practice because then you can meditate when you're at the airport or you're sitting at the DMV waiting to get a new license or whatever. You can sit and meditate very inconspicuously without people, going, what is this weirdo doing in the corner of the room, So it makes meditation more accessible in different day-to-day environments. Also, you can practice meditation while having a conversation with somebody. If you can try to sit and be aware of your breathing and be aware of yourself while talking to somebody, it allows you to listen much more deeply to them. Listen to the cadence of their voice. Listen to where are they speaking from their head? Are they speaking from their heart? Are they speaking from their gut? If you are meditating while having a conversation with somebody, it brings a whole new depth to the conversation. And you hear things that you would not otherwise hear if you're only listening with your mind with half your attention. So the third posture is the Burmese posture. And this is probably the most common posture that I sit in. It's very good and comfortable in nature because you can do it. You don't need to have a meditation pillow and things. In this posture, the feet are in front of each other. So either the right foot in front of the left or left, and you can vary it. But what you're doing is you're sitting on a pillow. So I have a pillow under my butt, right? And then a big pillow underneath my whole body. And I'm sitting with my feet like this. But the front of my knees and my shins are fully touching the ground. So everything's flat on the ground like that. This is a very comfortable position over time, and you can sit for hours like this. Again, I find it the most accessible, the most commonly used, and quite helpful. The next is half lotus. And with this, you're bringing one foot up onto the thigh of the other knee. Again, this can be a little bit off-centering. So for some people, if their hips are very open and they've done a lot of yoga, for example, they can sit with one foot on the thigh and the same knee on the other foot. So you can practice this if you'd like, but the bottom leg is like that and the top leg is kind of stacked on top like this. That's half lotus. And then full lotus is with both feet tucked all the way up onto the thighs. Most people who can comfortably sit in this position have done a lot of yoga, or they've practiced it every day. You can get very comfortable in this position. The most powerful thing about this position is that if you practice it a lot and you get comfortable in it, you don't need a pillow under your butt, and you can go into very deep states of absorption because your whole body is coiled together very tightly. So you can sit for really a long time. And most serious, really serious meditators who are sitting at least 2 hours a day, they'll sit in that position because for long, long periods of time, it's the most comfortable. But for the first year, it's not particularly comfortable unless you're very flexible. I think that's the main thing I wanted to cover in posture. Posture is really important. It's really central to a meditation practice. Just finding posture and then following the breath, just following the inhalation and exhalation, that in and of itself is a great foundational practice that some people would say you should do that for many years before even going into other practices. So that's a significant thing. It's the foundational practice is posture and just observing the breathing, coming back to the breath. As you start to lose your attention or drift off, then you take a couple deep breaths and come back to observing the breath. That alone, if you can master that meditation, you could take that all the way to a mastery of meditation. You don't have to go into all these other advanced, visualizations or, Naga yoga meditations or microcosmic breathing or all of that. You don't need those meditations. They just serve different purposes. The foundation of meditation is posture and breath. Now, I'm hoping that my computer does not die. I just saw the thing pop up saying that if I don't plug it in soon, it's going to. So I'm just going to mention one last thing, which is tools, and then I'll plug the computer in. You know what? Give me 1 sec. I don't want to cut you guys off without giving you a chance to ask some questions. Okay. The last thing I want to say is just about tools in preparation for meditation. So, as I was talking about in yesterday morning's class, the first thing I think is the most helpful for developing a strong meditation practice: find an area in your house, create a little altar. Maybe you have a little statue on it, or an incense censer, or a candle, or some images and things that you want to cultivate in your life. Create a sacred area in your home. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's nice to bring in elements of nature to remind you of the season and to remind us that we're part of something much bigger than us, part of nature. And have a place in your home that you go to every day, because it starts to develop a magnetic force that draws you to it. And when you go back to that place every day, over time, you'll feel like a rubber band. You might leave and go on a vacation. You'll feel yourself going, I want to get back into my practice. Creating a habit, something I always say is, discipline with meditation is only difficult until it becomes a habit. Once it becomes a habit, it becomes as necessary to your well-being as eating healthy food and drinking enough water and getting enough sleep. It becomes part of your mental hygiene and your emotional well-being, your emotional hygiene. And you'll realize if you fall away from your practice, which happens to all of us, you'll start to feel, I just noticed my life is different, and you come back to it, especially if you have a place in your house. A thing that's nice is at that place in your house, maybe have a basket or a small chest or something, and in it you can keep sacred objects, which are these tools that I'm going to talk about. One is clothing. So I just today had a meeting with a friend of mine who makes beautiful natural dyed flax and linen clothes and hemp clothes, and we're actually going to make some beautiful, simple and elegant they're Asian inspired. They're kind of like monastic, almost like kimonos, but they're unisex for males or females, that would be used for Tai Chi or Qigong practice, but also for meditation. So for example, I have a beautiful handmade coat. It's not a coat, it's like a thin over, like a sweatshirt almost, that was made by a monk in Thailand. And every morning I put that on. I haven't recently, but that's just because my life is insane at the moment. But it's insane, but I'm still meditating every day. So there you go. But I put it on every morning, and as I start buttoning it, I can feel, okay, I'm stepping into this space. It's almost like a magic thing, and I love the way the fabric feels. It reminds me, okay, I'm stepping into this. And I feel like it was made with intention and hand woven. So getting yourself into a frame of mind of, I'm getting into my meditation practice, instead of, oh, I got 5 minutes, there's something about slowing the mind down and creating the space. We have a beautiful saying in our tradition, which is, the primary meditation is to make space for meditation. That's something that Buddha says often, and I come back to it often when I'm falling off my practice. The primary meditation is to make space for meditation. So clothing is one. Beads. So I've been doing more bead work. I'm going to load a video on a bead meditation, a mala meditation, to the website tomorrow. And there's 108 beads. You can, with every inhalation, move the left hand, and exhalation, the right hand, and work your way around a beads. It takes about 12 to 13 minutes. It's a really nice way to time your meditation without having like an alarm or any technology in your space. That sacred space should be a tech-free zone. Unless you really like listening to music during your tea ceremony, for example. The thing is, the temptation is like too strong. So on that morning when you're tired and a little out of it, and you get a notification, and all of a sudden half an hour later you're like, what the hell am I doing right now? Like I came here to drink tea mindfully and meditate, and instead I'm looking at like some influencer's Instagram post about some nonsense, so I generally really try to keep that space technology free, and that's why using a bead is a nice way of counting. 3 rounds on a mala is a 40-minute meditation, and that's a very beautiful and deep meditation. The other thing is you'll notice every time you get to another round of beads, you're going deeper and deeper and deeper. The concentration gets more refined, more focused. All the thoughts of things you have to do that day, or what you're going to have for lunch, or whatever, all of that starts to fall away, fall away, fall away. And that's when you can go into these deeper states of absorption. Another way to start a meditation that's nice, with the beads, what you'll see in different places in Asia is sometimes they rub the beads together. And just the sound of that, right, starts to get the mind primed. In Tibetan Buddhism, you'll see they ding the little bells, or they might play a singing bowl, right? When they do that, if you play a singing bowl, those have frequencies and things that happen that are incredible, but you can follow the sound with your attention, and it will take you until it drifts deep, deep, deep into absorption. And then when the sound stops, you enter into your meditation, right? That's a beautiful way to start a meditation, with a little bell or a singing bowl or something. Some people like to light a candle. And the candle, first you watch the flickering on the outside. The outside is yang. It's the red or orange. The inside of the candle is the blue part. That's the yin inside. And so we say fire is yang. So it is transformative. It is powerful on the outside. But it's all about the external. Whereas water is yin. And it's weak on the outside, but it's very powerful on the inside. So if you look at a candle, you can start looking at the periphery, kind of that area around where you can see the heat coming off, and then let your attention come to the red part, and then into the blue part in the center, and then as you're ready, close the eyes and enter into meditation. And if the mind keeps wandering throughout the meditation, you might gently open the eyes and come back to the candle, or you can even draw the candle into your attention and your awareness and hold the flickering inside and then settle into the meditation. You draw it into the heart or draw it into the center of the mind. The next is incense. I'm really excited. We have some really beautiful incense from Baido at Living Tea that I've been looking for a company that I really want to work with for quite a while, because we've always carried aloes wood, but I wanted to carry some other types of incense for meditation and tea. So we have some very beautiful incense now that's all handmade. I like using aloes wood because I find it calms the mind and it's very soothing. But people like to use sandalwood as well. And there's, of course, lots of different kinds of incense. Generally, the really sticky, resinous incense is not so good. You want lighter incense that's not going to distract you. Whenever I smell incense now, I immediately feel like I'm in a meditation space because I light incense before every time I sit. So it's just become, I smell incense and I just feel like, oh, we're meditating now. Great. So that's kind of nice. Tea, of course, obviously tea. Tea is a great facilitator to deep states of meditation as a gentle, benign, yet psychoactive plant medicine. Drinking tea alchemically means drinking the tea that is going to be most supportive to how you're feeling that day. So we drink tea seasonally, but I also, like, if I wake up in the morning and I notice my mind's very active, I might drink a tea that's very grounding, very rooted. If I'm sluggish and tired and I just don't feel motivated, I might drink a tea that opens me up. If I feel gloomy and depressed, I might drink an oolong that's sweet and soothing and creative and ethereal and opens up your higher centers. So drinking teas that facilitate meditation are very helpful. I like to drink, sometimes I drink tea before meditation, sometimes I meditate before tea. Nowadays, because I have a 10-month-old son, it's important for me that I get meditation in every day. So I'm meditating before tea because there's a good chance that I'm only going to get my 20 to 40 minutes in, and then I'm going to get, call in, help, and I've got to go do other things. So I prioritize the meditation, and then I can hang out with Lyndon while I'm drinking tea. It's not how I would prefer to drink tea, but I also would never trade hanging out with him. So that's something. And then the most important tool, if it was choose all of those tools together or this one tool, I would say clear those off the table. By far the most important tool, you could even say it is meditation itself, is the breath. The breath is the beginning and the end of meditation. The space between the inhalation and the exhalation is a doorway. And you remember what we were saying earlier about doorways. By observing the breath, we can manage our emotions, we can manage our mind, we can manage the energy in the body, our nervous system, we can manage our ability to respond to life instead of react to life. And also, coming back to the breath, it's always there. The breath is with us from the minute we're born until the minute we die. The more consciously we breathe, the more deeply we can access meditation. So, people like Wim Hof and a lot of contemporary people are teaching different types of pranayama and different types of ujjayi breath and the breath of fire and this breath and that breath. There's a lot of wonderful ways of breathing to open and clear stagnation out of the body, open up the meridians, open the nadis, move through stress, anxiety, difficulty in life. The breath can be used as an extraordinary tool in that way. But what we're talking about here is using the breath for meditation. It is the anchor. So you can imagine that every time you inhale, you're dropping a bucket down a well. And every time you exhale, you're bringing the bucket back up. And when the breath isn't still and steady, the bucket tips, it knocks into the walls, the water spills, it falls up and down. You want to imagine that the breath is like, the steadiness of the breath is like that bucket going down, perfectly drawing up the Jing energy, that deep energy, earth energy, and coming back up. And it's going up and down very smooth. Looking to create a smooth and long and steady breath is at the heart of good meditation. Okay, I think I've probably said more than enough. Thank you for sticking with me for this hour and 40 some odd minutes. I hope there was something in all of that will be of value to you in your practice and that will support you. Again, I feel meditation is one of the most profound gifts I've ever received in my life. I can't imagine my life without it, to be totally honest. And I hope that, I wish you great luck in your meditation practice. And we sit every Thursday, so if you can come, then please join us, because the more people that sit together, the more powerful and the deeper the meditations. That's always the case. Something happens, everybody's energetic field combines, and we all go into a deeper space. So, thank you. If you're just sick of being on Zoom, then I totally understand. We can say arrivederci, or if you have any questions or comments, then by all means, please share them now.
Hi, Colin. It's Lori.
Hi, Lori.
Thank you again so much.
Of course.
I have a question. I'm just wondering if you can touch on one of the last things that you said was pairing the tea with your emotional state.
Yeah.
You just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the long-winded version of that is to say that each tea has an elemental makeup: wood, fire, water, earth, metal, etc. And so, like, at a subtle level, you could say, okay, I need to incorporate some more wood or fire tea into my life today, right? But the way I would look at it to start for now, and I'll do a class on that at some point, the way to think about it for now is just yin and yang. Yang teas are going to be activating, invigorating, enlivening. They tend to move to the surface of the skin. They might increase the heartbeat a little bit. Any clean tea that's free of chemicals should never make you feel jittery or uncomfortable. But those tend to be the teas that are moving. They move stagnant energy out of the body. If you feel stuck in a moment or stuck in a day, they can help move things out and clear things. Those are also the teas you might drink at the beginning of the day when you want energy for the day, right? When you feel sluggish or tired, they're activating teas, right? So I would call those more yang teas. Those generally tend to be more like the red teas, some oolongs, sometimes young pu'er tea, meaning that it hasn't been aged. Sheng pu'er, more than sho pu'er. The sheng pu'ers are like that. Matcha is like that because you consume the whole leaf, and some matcha can be like, whoa, I'm ready to go run a marathon right now. As opposed to yin teas, which are calming, grounding, centering. They tend to bring the energy down into the gut, down into the earth. They usually taste pretty earthy. They taste like soil and roots and bark, and those are the teas that tend to drop you down, and they facilitate meditation. They're calming, they calm the mind. Those are teas that really facilitate doing inner work, inner introspective work, and exploring your inner landscape. Oftentimes strong sho pu'er can be sedative. I mean, it can make you feel like, whoa, I need to so generally those are aged sheng pu'er, like old aged teas, sho pu'er, as well as some yencha, which is a type of rock oolong, cliff oolong from Fujian. Sometimes you can have that feeling with like really delicate, refined, vaporous white teas, but those white teas, it's more that they can take you into some kind of like misty, ethereal mountaintop realm. It's not that they're grounding. It's more that they kind of are calming and they make you feel kind of dreamy and euphoric, So I would start there because that's a lot to explore there. Teas that are grounding and good for meditation and good for like feeling centered. Those are also good if you're in some emotional turmoil or something difficult you're going through. They're comforting and they're grounding and they feel like a home cooked meal kind of with your with a loved one. Like they're just like, okay, Whereas other teas are more about opening and creativity and expression. So that's a good place to start, yin and yang, And then there are deeper levels of refinement looking at, okay, wood element, what's a fire element tea? What is a metal element tea? What does that mean? And going deeper into that side of things. We're going to go deep into those on the retreat in August. So if you feel inspired, come spend 6 days with us, and we're going to go into all that stuff. If not, we'll go through it in classes and whatnot over the coming year. So cool. All right. Well, I think it's a Friday night. I'm sure people are getting hungry. Or it looks like, I don't know where you are. You're up it looks dark there. It's probably later.
Yeah, we're up in Toronto, so it's 10, almost 10.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging out late night with us. That's great.
Oh, it's great. It's awesome. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, cool. So I think, unless you guys have another question, we will call it a night, and we'll see you next week. I don't know if we're going to have the meditation in class next week because I'm taking a couple days to go soak in a hot spring because we've just been working so much here, and so we're going to take a little break because we're about to open the tea house and everything's kind of ramping up, so we need a little breather. But we'll be back the following week, and it's so nice to see everyone, and I appreciate everybody attending these little fireside chats.
Yeah, you need a break. You guys have been going full on.
Yeah, we've been at it, so it's great. You know, the beauty of doing something you love is you have more energy to do it because it doesn't feel like work. But when it starts feeling like work, that's when you go, all right, we got to take. I need a couple of days off here. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate the meditations and the classes. Like, thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. That's great.
Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. All right, everybody, have a good night. We'll see you soon.
Great night.
Bye-bye. There. Snurgin. Bourbon dude.